Hey YouTube, what's going on? Abyssal Wave here, and today I'm going to be going over the Dungeon Destroyer build for Unholy DKs for Mythic Plus. Now this build is just tailored to absolutely stomp through trash packs in Mythic Plus while still maintaining a decent amount of DPS for the bosses, because right now with affixes, right now for Mythic Plus and the scaling difficulty of Mythic Plus increasing exponentially now as opposed to what it was previously, which was more linear, then we're going to require a lot more damage for Mythic Plus, especially on trash packs, and this build delivers on that. It does a substantial amount of damage on Mythic Plus. I have the talents right now on the left side of the screen so you can kind of look at them, but I'm going to be going over them one-on-one with you guys in a second, but this build is a lot of fun as well, and let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to be going over with the build is the top legendaries for the build, and the best legendary for this build by far is Soul of the Deathlord. Obviously, this is a very tough legendary to get right now with it only being out for a couple days, but if you have this legendary, it is absolutely incredible for this build. Ebon Fever and Bursting Swords together is incredibly strong for not only AoE situations, but it also really helps for single target, with Ebon Fever being the best single target talent in that tier, and Bursting Swords being the best AoE or heavy add cleave talent in that tier as well. The next legendary that is absolutely incredible with this build is actually the Wrist. The Wrist, even though they got nerfed pretty heavily to 1 to 2 festering wounds per pop, synergizing that with Bursting Swords makes that an incredibly strong legendary for this build, and it offers you a lot more cleave, being able to pop more of those. You're also going to be pairing Infected Claws with this build, so having that legendary is just absolutely incredible, and it does increase your damage pretty significantly. Those are the two best legendaries for this build right now. The next legendary that is absolutely incredible for this build is the Helmet. Now, the Helmet isn't as good as the others, even though you might think that it's just as good, if not better, because it does decrease the cooldown of Defile. However, the problem with it is you do have time in between packs, downtime, that does recharge your Defile, so you're not always having to have it up like on a boss fight or a raid boss. In that situation, you would want it up more often, but in a dungeon where you have the downtime running in between trash packs and mobs, it just isn't as important to have that reduced cooldown, which does decrease the importance of having that legendary. And the last legendary that is absolutely incredible for this build is Killjaden's Burning Wish. The reason this legendary is so good is because the on-use effect, it does do a ton of damage itself, and not only that, it does offer the most strength out of any trinket you're going to be able to get, and it does give you a decent amount of secondary stats, which does make it a phenomenal trinket to use, and overall just a great legendary. So next we're going to be going over the talents individually and why they're better than the other talents in that tier. So the first talent we're going to be going over is Bursting Swords and why you run it. The reason you run Bursting Swords in this build is just because it offers the best amount of cleave. Now, of course, if you do have Soul of the Deathlord, then you get both Bursting Swords and Ebon Fever, and you may think Ebon Fever does offer you more AoE, however, it just simply does not offer more AoE than Bursting Swords does. Even in a pack of 2 to 3 mobs, Bursting Swords is still going to offer you more cleave, and pairing that up with the next talent we're going to talk about does make Bursting Swords incredibly powerful. So next talent I'm going to talk about is Blighted Rune Weapon. Now the reason I run this is because it's really nice to have these moments where you're just able to pop Blighted Rune Weapon, throw it on your Defile, and just absolutely destroy trash pack by just spamming Clawing Shadows as you just lay into them with Bursting Swords, just exploding constantly. It really does offer you a lot more utility than getting the extra rune every couple of wounds you pop from Pestilent Pustules, and of course, the other talent in that tier is just not nearly as good as the others. I find personally Blighted Rune Weapon to be an incredibly powerful talent, and you are able to use it every minute, which is a very low cooldown for such a strong talent. The next talent we're going to talk about is Clawing Shadows. Now, the reason I run Clawing Shadows over Unholy Frenzy for this build is because I'm not running Dark Arbiter. The reason you would run Unholy Frenzy in a build for Unholy DKs is when you really want more sudden doom procs, or you really need them, which you would need for Dark Arbiter in order to get the free death coils, in order to really pump up the damage of your Dark Arbiter. However, Clawing Shadows with this build, it allows you to stack Mastery, which does increase the damage of your Defile and most other of your abilities, your Festering Wounds as well, and Clawing Shadows just plays off of that heavy stacking of Mastery. You really aren't starved for haste with this build. You really don't need a lot of crit, but you do need a lot of Mastery for this build to really be effective. Clawing Shadows just really plays with that well, and also you're able to attack mobs from a distance with this. So with mobs that teleport away, such an Arcway and other Mythic Plus, you're just able to continually have uptime on them, popping wounds constantly, and it is just a very phenomenal talent, and it's a lot of fun to run personally. The next two tiers are really interchangeable. Of course, Sludge Belcher does offer you more utility than the others with the hook from the Sludge Belcher itself. So I do run that talent just because it is such a staple in that tier. And I do run Spell Eater most of the time because the extra shield from AMS does offer you more runic power, which in turn does give you more utility overall in the dungeon with Death Coils. However, you are able to run Lingering Apparition if you really want to keep up with your group, and that is definitely okay to run. The next talent is Infected Claws. Now, the reason you run Infected Claws is because when your Infected Claws is going off and your Abomination is really just laying into everything with wounds, if you do throw down your Defile, you're able to pop the wounds on everything with one Clawing Shadows, and that is absolutely awesome. Infected Claws does really synergize well with Mythic Plus. It even works with Death and Decay if you don't want to run Defile with this build. If you maybe want to run your Dark Arbiter because you're having trouble with bosses, or you're running Soul Reaper for the same reason, then you are able to change this out. But overall, Infected Claws is just incredibly powerful for not only single target, but AoE situations, and it really plays well with being able to pop a lot of your Bursting Swords and just destroying trash packs. The last talent with this, which really makes it the build, is Defile. Now, the reason Defile is so strong in Mythic Plus is because not only does it do double the damage of Death and Decay does, it also increases in size when you have enemies in it, and it does give you a stacking mastery buff. Now, the reason that is so strong is because that is just straight up damage. That is not only straight up damage from your Clawing Shadows, that is damage from your Festering Wounds, that is damage from your Plague, that is damage from most everything that Unholy DKs use damage wise. So it is just a very, very strong talent, and personally I find it a lot of fun. I'm putting a macro in the description for this, where it's just wherever you place your cursor is where it places down your Defile whenever you use the mouse button that you have Defile on. But it is an absolutely incredible talent. It's a lot of fun ever since they buffed it. They buffed it very significantly, so it is competitive not only in AoE, but it does do a decent amount of single target damage, and in fights where there are constant adds coming in, it is a really strong talent. But overall, in Mythic Plus, it just dominates the other talents. You are able to do this. If you don't have Death's March, you still do a ton of damage with this build, and you will blow up big trash packs. So first, I'm going to demonstrate the rotation in an AoE setting here. I have 3 of the training dummies, and I'm not going to be using Army of the Dead for this because on most AoE situations or trash pack pulls in Mythic Plus, you're not going to be using Army of the Dead. You're going to be saving it for actual boss fights in order to really pump out the damage there, and you don't need it on the trash packs. So let's get into the actual rotation. So before either we load into the Mythic Plus and the countdown starts, or I know I'm going to engage a trash pack, I do pop Blighted Rune Weapon early because it does last for 30 seconds, and then I pop my Gargle, I pop my Dark Transformation. Of course, I have the shoulders, but that doesn't matter. Throw out my Plagues, throw out my Defile, and then I start laying in with Clawing Shadows, use my Trinket, and then I start using my Clawing Shadows quite a bit, not worrying about really anything else. And then you can use your Apocalypse there. It does really proc everything. And it does proc your Bursting Sword, so it's really nice. And then I'm just laying into everything. My Defile is gone, but as you can see on 3 targets, I was able to maintain 2 million DPS, and I'm still able to keep above 1.9 mil here on an AoE fight. And then one of my wounds goes down there, restock my Plagues, and then thrown in another Defile, and as you can see, my Defile just popped, but my Blighted Rune Weapon is coming up. Now, you do want to kind of synergize those together, so I'm going to hold off on my next Defile, or my next Blighted Rune Weapon, until my Defile's up, so I am able to really pump in my damage with Blighted Rune Weapon up, because that is going to offer me the most damage possible. And then I'm just following a priority rotation. And as you can see on 3 targets, I am able to maintain a significant amount of damage. You just want to watch what your Abomination is popping rune-wise. And then I throw down my Defile, throw down that, my Blighted, and then I just start laying in with my Clawing Shadows. Now, this build is just insane for AoE situations, and you are going to notice how heavily it does scale in those AoE situations. Now, if you want to kind of save your Blighted Rune Weapon, let's say one target is getting near max stacks of Festering Wounds, you can switch and have your Blighted Rune Weapon cleave off of your other targets, which is completely okay, and it does offer you to save some of your Festering Wounds instead of just wasting them. But of course, then I pop my Defile again, I stack up some more wounds, I use Apocalypse there, it does a ton of damage of course because of Bursting Sword, and then I just start laying in some more And this is the reason this build is so strong. It's really because of what Defile can really do. It's just an incredible talent, and it does offer you a ton of damage nowadays with the significant buffs to it. As you can see, we did 100 million damage and we maintained over 1.4 million DPS. Now, with other builds, it is still very possible to maintain a significant amount of DPS. However, on AoE situations, this build just tops the list. It offers you the most damage, and it just really delivers on single target as well. You are able to maintain, with decent gear, around 800k or more single target on boss fights. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it useful. Start pushing those Mythic Pluses, even though they're kind of less valuable. This is still an incredible build to run for not only Frost DKs to run, but Unholy DKs who think that the Soul Reaver build is the strongest. Try out this build, see if you like it. It's got a fun playstyle to it as well, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.